The woman stepped out of the black Escalade like she owned the road, the sky, and probably the gravel underneath it. Cormac didn't look up right away. He was elbow-deep in the engine of his old Massey Ferguson, the one his father had bought used in 1987 and somehow kept alive through 3 decades of hard Quebec winters. The hydraulic line had been weeping fluid since Tuesday, and he'd been putting off the fix, because Lily had a school concert on Wednesday, and the north pasture fence needed patching before Thursday's rain. There was always something. There was always a reason to put off the thing you actually needed to do. He heard the car door, heard the heels on gravel, didn't look up. "Excuse me," he kept working. "Excuse me," the man with the tractor. He looked up then, not because of the words but because of the tone. It was the kind of voice that expected people to stop what they were doing. He'd heard that tone before, usually from people who'd never had to fix their own anything. There were 3 of them. 2 men in dark suits stood near the vehicle, hands folded, watching the fields with the careful blankness of people paid to look uninterested. The woman was in front, somewhere in her early 40s maybe, with the sort of groomed precision that takes real money to maintain. Blonde hair in a tight chignon, a camel-colored blazer that hadn't been bought at any store in the county. She had a folder tucked under one arm and was looking at the Massey Ferguson the way someone looks at roadkill. "Is there a property manager I can speak with?" she asked. "Or someone in charge?" Cormac straightened up slowly. He wiped his hands on the rag that lived in his back pocket. He was in his work clothes, canvas jacket, worn jeans, boots with a crack along the left sole he kept meaning to resole. "You're speaking with him," he said. She blinked, recalibrated. The smile that followed was practiced. "I see, and you are?" "Cormac Hebert. This is my land." She glanced at the fields around them, the hay bale still sitting in the south field, the aging barn with the mismatched boards where he'd made repairs over the years, the tractor that was, admittedly, not a pretty sight. "Mr. Hebert," she said, and there was something in the way she said it, a fraction of a pause, a slight recalibration of expectations. "My name is Vanessa Price. I'm the Director of Acquisitions for Price Capital. We're developing a resort corridor along the lake shore, high-end, 4-season, designed to bring significant economic value to the region. Your property is adjacent to our current holdings, and we'd like to make you an offer." Cormac said nothing. "A generous one," she added. A screen door banged on the house behind them. Both suited men turned. Vanessa didn't. She kept her eyes on Cormac, which might have been professional, or might have been that she'd already assessed the house and decided it wasn't worth her attention. A girl came across the yard at a run, maybe 7 years old, dark-haired, wearing rubber boots that didn't match. One was green, one was yellow. She'd been that way since March and Cormac had stopped trying to correct it. "Dad." "Dad." She arrived breathless. "Mrs. Tremblay says the lamb is doing the thing again with its leg. The limping thing or the falling down thing?" "The falling down thing." "Okay." He looked back at Vanessa. "I'll have to ask you to wait a moment, or you can leave your card and I'll call you." Vanessa Price looked at the girl, then at Cormac. The calculation behind her eyes was almost visible. Single father, aging equipment, weathered farm, probably cash-strapped. She smiled again, the same practiced one. "We'll wait," she said. Cormac had been 41 years old for 3 weeks, which meant he was also in his 3rd year of doing this alone. Lily's mother, Renee, had died of an aneurysm in the kitchen of this same house on a Tuesday morning in October. Lily had been 4. She'd been eating cereal at the table. Cormac had been out checking the east fence. By the time he came in, it was over. He didn't talk about it much. Not because he'd closed over it, he wasn't sure he had, but because there was too much to do to spend time narrating grief. The farm needed tending. Lily needed breakfast and mittens and someone to remember that she was afraid of thunderstorms, and to sit with her in the hallway closet until they passed, because for some reason, Renee had told her once that the closet was a safe place, and now that was the ritual. He had 240 acres in the eastern townships, 2 hours east of Montreal, near a town called Saint Edmond de Grantham that most people had never heard of. The land had been in the Hebert family for 4 generations. His great-grandmother had cleared the north field by hand. His grandfather had built the barn. His father had added the east pasture and nearly lost everything doing it, and then spent 30 years paying it back. Cormac had inherited the debt and the land at the same time, which seemed, in retrospect, about right for this family. He raised sheep, a small flock, heritage breed, Rideau Arcot, and kept a large kitchen garden and sold at the regional farmers market on Saturdays. He also leased 40 acres to a neighboring operation for hay. It wasn't a lucrative life, it was a life. The lamb's leg turned out to be a minor joint issue, probably from the cold snap last week. He wrapped it, gave Lily a job to do so she'd feel involved, and went back to find Vanessa Price sitting on the fence rail next to the gate, still in her blazer, looking at her phone. She looked up when she heard him coming, put the phone away with the particular efficiency of someone reclaiming their professional bearing. "Mr. Hebert, thank you for your patience. My daughter's name is Lily," he said. She paused. "Pardon?" You looked at her like she was an obstacle. "Her name is Lily." Vanessa Price was quiet for a moment. It was hard to tell if she was embarrassed or simply recalculating. "Of course," she said finally. "I meant no disrespect." Cormac walked to the fence and leaned on it beside her, which wasn't an invitation so much as a practical decision. The sun was in his eyes on the other side. He looked out at the field. "What's the number?" he said. 2.1 million. He nodded slowly, didn't respond. "That's substantially above assessed value," she said. "We've done our research. The property is classified agricultural, the house needs work, the outbuildings are where they need to be," he said. "I didn't mean, what are you building?" She shifted, opened her folder. A 4-season resort, luxury cabins, a spa facility, an event center for corporate retreats and weddings. There's strong market demand for that kind of development in the eastern townships right now. The lake access makes it particularly. Which lake? She hesitated for just a fraction of a second. Lac Vieille Forge. He turned and looked at her for the first time with real attention. Lac Vieille Forge was a lake that most people outside of St. Edmund had never heard of. It sat in a bowl between 2 ridges about 1.5 kilometers east of his barn. He'd grown up swimming in it. Renee had learned to skate on it the winter after they'd met, when the ice came in thick and still, and the light on the snow was the color of something you couldn't name. Lily's name came from the lily pads that ringed the southern end from June through August. "What's your access?" he asked. "I'm sorry, your access to the lake. What land are you coming through?" She set the folder on the fence rail and pointed east. "We've acquired the old Gagnon farm, that's the parcel on the north shore, and the property south of it, which was a decommissioned campground. Between those two we have. The shoreline's protected," he said. "Since 2019. You know that?" "We do. We're working within the provincial shoreline buffer regulations. The development footprint." "Your development footprint doesn't include getting to the lake," he said. "The Gagnon property doesn't have road access to the south shore, and the campground, the old one, that road was closed when the municipality took back the right-of-way." He looked at her. "I know because I was on the planning committee when it happened." Something shifted in her expression. "The only viable road access to the south shore of Lac Vieille Forge," he said, "runs through here." He nodded at the ground beneath them. "Through my land." She closed the folder. One of the suited men near the escalade had straightened slightly, like an antenna picking up a signal. "There's also the question of water rights," Cormac continued, almost conversationally. "The spring that feeds the eastern inlet, the one that keeps the lake clean, that spring is on my north pasture, has been for as long as anyone's mapped it." He paused. "I had it surveyed in 2021. My lawyer has the documents." Vanessa Price looked at the north pasture, then back at him. "Without my land," he said, not unkindly, "you have 2 expensive properties and no way to reach your lake." The silence that followed was the kind that fills up fast. "Mr. Hebert," she said, and this time the rehearsed smoothness was gone from her voice. "Not entirely, but enough to notice. I think we may have approached this incorrectly." "A little bit, yeah." She turned to look at the farm around her, as if she was seeing it differently now. The old barn with its mismatched boards. The field where the hay bales sat quiet in the afternoon light. The kitchen garden, dormant now but well kept, laid out in careful rows. "May I ask, why didn't you lead with that?" she said. "The access question, the water rights. You could have said so immediately." "I could have," he agreed. "But you didn't, no." He was quiet for a moment, watching a pair of crows work their way along the fence line. "My great-grandmother cleared that north field in 1921, he said. "My grandfather built that barn board by board. My father broke his back paying off the mortgage on the east pasture. My wife," he stopped, started again. My wife is buried at the edge of the south field under the 2 maples. That's why the fence line jogs east of where it should. I didn't want the fence going through that spot." Vanessa said nothing. "Lily was 4 when she died," he said. "She's 7 now. She names the lambs after characters in books she hasn't finished yet. She wears mismatched boots because she says they help her remember that not everything has to be the same." He looked at Vanessa. "I'm not interested in $2.1 million. I'm not interested in being bought. That's not arrogance. It's just, this is what we are." Lily appeared at the corner of the barn, watching them with the frank curiosity of a child who knows something important is happening. "Your access question is real," Cormac said. "And I don't hold grudges, so I'm not telling you this to be cruel, but whatever your project is, you need to start by talking to people honestly. Not assuming." He picked up the red from the fence and tucked it back in his pocket. "I'd suggest you go back to whoever drew up your acquisition plan and ask them why they didn't flag the access issue before you spent however much you spent on those 2 properties." She stood there for a moment. Behind her, the Escalade gleamed black and expensive in the afternoon sun. "We could." She started carefully. "We could structure something different, an easement agreement instead of a sale. A long-term access arrangement that preserved your ownership, your operations, with fair compensation." "I know," he said. "I've thought about it." She looked surprised. "You have? You're not the first developer to find their way out here. Probably won't be the last." He shrugged. "I don't need development money, but I do need a new roof on the barn, and the east pasture fence needs a full rebuild. And I've been trying to put Lily in a better school in town, which means gas money I don't always have." He looked at the barn. "So I'm not closed. I'm just not cheap and I'm not stupid. And I need to know that whoever is on the other side of a conversation with me has done me the respect of knowing who I actually am before they show up." Vanessa Price looked at him for a long time. Then, slowly, she closed her folder for the last time and set it down on the fence rail, not as someone setting aside a tool, but as someone setting down a posture. "I owe you an apology," she said. "I made assumptions about this place and about you that weren't fair. That's not how I want to do business, even if it's sometimes how it ends up looking." "Apologies accepted," he said. "Meant it. Can I ask, the lake, Lac Va Forge, what does it mean to you?" The question surprised him, and he let himself feel surprised, because it was a real question. He thought about the morning in November, 3 weeks after Renee died, when he'd walked out to the lake before dawn, not for any reason, just to be somewhere that didn't have walls. The ice had been starting to form at the edges, thin and pale as paper. He'd stood there until the sun came up, and the cold became genuinely dangerous, and then he'd walked back and made Lily's breakfast, and she'd eaten her cereal. And he'd understood, standing at the counter watching her, that he had a reason to keep going, and that the reason was wearing purple pajamas with a missing button on the left cuff. "It's where we come from," he said finally. "It's not an investment. It's not an asset. It's where we come from." Vanessa nodded. Something in her face had changed. Not dramatically. Not in the way of a movie conversion, but genuinely. The kind of small shift that happens when someone hears something they weren't prepared to hear, and it lands somewhere honest. "My firm is going to want to proceed," she said. "With or without your easement, they'll try to find another route. I know that too, but I'm going to recommend we come back to the table with a different approach. Full disclosure, real negotiation, community impact assessment done properly." She paused. "I can't promise they'll listen, I know, but I want you to know I'm going to try." He looked at her. It was the first thing she'd said all afternoon that he fully believed. "That's all you can do," he said. Lily had drifted closer without either of them noticing, the way children do. She was standing about 3 meters away, openly watching, one mismatched boot tracing a line in the gravel. "Are you the lady from the car?" she said to Vanessa. "I am," Vanessa said. "It's a very shiny car. Thank you." "Our tractor isn't shiny," Lily said factually, gesturing at the Massey Ferguson. "Dad says that's because it actually works." Vanessa Price looked at Cormac, and something about her expression, a hint of real humor, unguarded, the first genuine thing she'd offered all afternoon, made him think that maybe, given different circumstances, she was someone worth knowing. "Your father," she said, looking back at Lily, "is absolutely right." The Escalade left a few minutes later, moving slowly back down the gravel lane toward the road. Cormac watched it go. Lily slipped her hand into his. "Was she trying to buy our farm?" she asked. "Trying," he said. Did you say no, for now? She thought about that. Good, she said. I don't want to move. Ginger's pregnant. Ginger was one of the ewes. He had not yet told Lily that he'd already known this. That's a good reason to stay, he said. They stood there together, his daughter with her mismatched boots and her practical wisdom. The afternoon light, going golden across the field where the hay bales sat waiting, and somewhere beyond the ridge, the lake that held 40 years of this family's quiet history, the ice forming at its edges already, thin and pale as paper. He thought about Renee sometimes as a voice. Not a ghost, nothing dramatic, but just a quality of attention she'd had, a way of seeing what actually mattered in a situation and pointing at it without ceremony. She would have said something plain and precise about today. She would have found the right word for the look on Vanessa Price's face in that last moment. He didn't know what the word was, but he thought it might be something like beginning. He picked up the rag, walked back to the Massey Ferguson, and got back to work.